thank you all for joining today for this continuation of our conversations around diversity and specifically around what we can do at Gladstone and in science in general to promote greater diversity, specifically thinking about how to do that with our Black colleagues, which are severely underrepresented, I think, throughout science, and it's true at Gladstone also. We're very fortunate today to have Dr. Gary May, who's the Chancellor at UC Davis, to speak with us. Gary has been very generous with his time, and last week spent some time with the faculty and leadership at Gladstone in an open discussion about things we might be able to do in the coming months and years in a sustained fashion to try to make a dent in this area and do the best that we can at Gladstone. And so it was, I think, very enlightening for all of us, and stimulated a lot of good discussion. And I know you guys will all enjoy his comments today, and we will have time for both Dr. May's comments as well as time for a discussion and a cute question and answer period. So I think I really look forward to that as well. Before coming to UC Davis as Chancellor, Dr. May was the Dean of the School of Engineering at Georgia Tech, and there knew Todd and Megan McDevitt very well and are close to them. And so I'm going to ask Todd to say a few introductory comments and introduce Gary more properly. Todd?
Thanks, Deepak. Thanks, Deepak. Yeah, it's a true pleasure to be able to have Gary speak with a group today. As Deepak said, Meg and I were both fortunate to get to know Gary and his wife, Lachelle, very well over the time that we spent at Georgia Tech. He was my dean for about half of the time that I was there. And, you know, in a lot of places, you don't always get to know, I'd say, the upper administration leadership well, but Georgia Tech being a very bottom-up place where they really help foster and facilitate the idea of ideas bubbling up from faculty, it was part of the culture to be very receptive to that. And so I had many occasions where I got to share ideas and thoughts and plans and stuff with Gary, and he was always incredibly supportive of that. Before he was a dean, he was actually chair of the electrical and computer engineering department at Tech, which was the largest. It's probably the largest, one of the largest engineering departments of any kind in the country, over 110 faculty at that time. And I always say that anyone who could be a leader of something of that size and be warmly respected and appreciated by a large number of faculty, that tells you a lot about the job that they're doing. And I think that had a lot to do with then Gary's promotion to dean after several years as well. He has an amazing track record as a scientist, as a mentor, and in particular, I think one of the things, and one of the things we were interested in having him speak us today was his track record in STEM activities. And he'll probably speak about a few of these too that I became well familiar with in my time there. Was the SHORE program, which he initiated for undergraduate research, which has been mimicked and emulated by multiple programs throughout the country. And then also FACES program, which was really to help to foster and facilitate academic careers in the engineering and sciences as well. And for this, and I think hopefully he'll mention, you know, in 2015, he received the Presidential Award for Excellence in STEM Mentoring from President Obama, which was, I know, one of really proud moment for him, but also a great picture opportunity he has with him that's proudly displayed in his office now. So with that, I don't want to cut into Gary's time. I just want to say that, you know, we were very pleased also personally that a couple of years after we made the move out west, that Gary did as well. So it's nice to have him in close proximity again. He actually has some roots in his history because he did his PhD at Cal. And so I think that probably helped recruit him back out west with an opportunity to be in that close area again. So Gary, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Todd. Good morning, everyone. And last week I had an opportunity to speak with a group of PIs and learn a little bit more about the Gladstone organization. And I'm really pleased to speak with this larger group here today. First, I want to once again thank Deepak and Todd and Meg for inviting me to speak to you and for hosting these critical conversations about diversity and equity. It's important that we talk about these issues even when it sometimes can be uncomfortable. I was asked to share some of my personal diversity story, if you will, today. I've spent much of my career working to increase diversity on college campuses and in the workforce, particularly in STEM fields. And today that's more important than ever. Events of recent months have only reaffirmed the need to build an inclusive society that recognizes and respects people from all backgrounds and experiences. I'm talking about the disproportionate negative impact of the pandemic on people of color, and also on the nationwide social justice unrest following the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis in May. George Floyd joins a long list of unarmed Black and brown men and women whose names you will recognize: Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, Oscar Grant, Michael Brown. Michael Brown was fatally shot by police in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014. And that incident happened less than 2 miles from where I grew up in St. Louis. So each time, this has happened, I've thought that could have been me. At a traffic stop, no one knows that I'm the chancellor of UC Davis, and no one knows that I have a PhD. I'm just a Black man in a car. As an African-American man, there are so many incidents and microaggressions that you experience throughout your life and career. Sometimes you become numb to them, but something like the killing of a George Floyd happens and it brings everything back to the forefront. You think about the times you were treated in a questionable or different way, and you wonder, was that because I'm Black, or was it something else? Is it just normal behavior around here? And you just never know what the truth is. I'll quote James Baldwin, one of my heroes, and he said this in 1961. And the quote is, to be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a state of rage almost all the time. And I've often felt that very viscerally, that quote. Baldwin also argued that a complex thing can't be made simple. Fundamentally, I think that that's the challenge of diversity, equity, and inclusion work that we do today. In 2020, it's a tall order for us to tackle a problem that's persisted for so many years, and we need a wide range of initiatives to address the inequities that persist for women and people of color, especially in STEM fields. And it's going to take a long-term commitment. Still, I think we do have a unique opportunity in this moment to create change. All across the country, we've heard the calls for social justice. And in these polarizing times, embracing diversity and inclusion is central for our humanity and for our evolution as a society. Each one of us has to do what we can, where we are, to eliminate racism, sexism, and all the other negative influences on our progress as a nation. And to be clear, when I refer to diversity, I'm talking about the full range of nationalities, the full spectrum of socioeconomic and cultural backgrounds, as well as a wide variety of political views and gender identities, and a rich diversity of talents and skill sets. In a moment, I'll talk more about the benefits of diversity and inclusion. But first, I want to share my personal journey through my life and my leadership opportunities. So I'm going to start by taking you back, and I mean all the way back to the beginning. Yeah, that's me there posing for the camera, trying to support a fairly substantial head on fairly weak arms at that time. I was born in St. Louis, as I said, and raised by my parents, Gloria and Warren. Unlike many leaders in higher education, I come from a fairly humble background. My mom spent 40 years teaching in St. Louis public schools. My dad was a postal worker. He didn't get a college degree until later in life, but he was a smart, determined guy. Here I am as a teenager, I think, almost, with mom and dad. This was taken in the late 70s in our home in St. Louis. Thank goodness mom's smile was big enough for dad and me, because we were both trying to be cool there. But you can see dad was pretty sharp. He taught me the value of carrying yourself with confidence, which I carried with me throughout my life. Education was a core value in the May family, and still is in my family. I was lucky to have an affinity for math and science as a young student. I often credit my early love of Lego and erector sets for sparking the engineer in me, and that extra $1 that my dad gave me for every A on my report card was also a good motivator. Either way, I took my studies seriously, and I was elected as a presidential scholar when I graduated from high school in 1981. To the left there is a quote, is a note that I received from President Reagan. The other picture shows me shaking hands with First Lady Nancy Reagan at the Presidential Scholar ceremony in DC. So this was really kind of a proud moment for my family. And I actually do really miss my hairline quite a bit there. I said a little bit about my mom. My mom remains one of my greatest inspirations. Here we are at my investiture at UC Davis after I was sworn in as the 7th chancellor in 2017. I'm also the first African-American chancellor at UC Davis and the second in the entire UC system. By the way, the first was Michael Drake. He just made history again by becoming the first African-American president of the system, succeeding Janet Napolitano. Anyway, so Mom was a groundbreaker in her own right. She was among the first to integrate the University of Missouri back in the 1950s. She was in the first class of African-Americans there. I think there were about 7 of them. So I think what she endured during her pursuit of higher education, and even now I carry her tenacity and her self-determination qualities with me very, very much. Mom entered the University of Missouri during the era of Jim Crow, the laws that enforced segregation in our country. Now, it always seems like Jim Crow was an era that was so long ago. You see it in these grainy movies and black and white pictures, and but you know, it really wasn't that long ago. It's just one generation from me, right? When my mom showed up to her dorm for the first time, the house mother got really upset. The house mother in those days was the person who was in charge of the dorm for the ladies. Anyway, the house mother didn't like the fact that Black girls were going to be moving in and living there. She asked questions like, where are they going to shower? Mom, I think she was a bit of a jokester. She told her, well, don't worry, it doesn't come off. So, but you know, Mom, you know, she never gave up, despite the instances of hateful language and other incidents that came her way. You know, she didn't let anyone get between her and her goal, which was to get a college degree, in her case, in education, so she could become a teacher. I learned quickly to follow her example when I started as an undergraduate at Georgia Tech. I had to stay focused and learn to rise above my own adversity. And yes, that's me. No, that's not one of the new addition. That's me back in those days. On my very first day moving into my dorm, you see some symmetry here with these dorm experiences. I found N-word lover written on my roommate's name card of his door. So Mom and Dad were very upset and nervous when they saw this. But, you know, I said, you know, it could be worse. You know, I'm glad to be living with the person who's the lover here rather than the person who wrote this on the card. So I persevered and pressed on, just like Mom did at the University of Missouri. You know, you just can't let the bigots win, whether they're trying to deflate you through racism, sexism, homophobia, whatever ism it is. You can't let them win. And I actually had another awakening while I was earning my degree in electrical engineering, you know, at Georgia Tech. I look around the laboratories and the classrooms and lecture halls and realized I was often the only or one of very few African Americans in the room, including the professors, which there were almost none. And that just didn't feel right. And so that became my motivation to go try to make a difference. So, you know, I found people that were mentors to me during those years. As an undergrad, I saw really a whole new world of possibilities open up that were embodied in the man that's pictured here. This is Dr. Augustine Esseboy. He was the first Black engineering professor at Georgia Tech. I think he started there sometime in the mid-70s. And, you know, he had it all. You know, he had sharp clothes, fancy car, the intellect. You know, we all kind of wanted to be like him. All of the African-American men and wanted to be like him. And he took me under his wing, and you know, the world kind of opened up. I saw, for the first time, I saw a Black man finding success in engineering. I had seen success on TV, and I had seen success in athletics for people that looked like me, but I had never seen an engineer or a professor that was doing these things. So that was really an eye-opener. So, you know, that just shows that mentoring is so important. I think everyone kind of needs some help along the way and to be able to see themselves in these roles. So I'm a huge fan of mentoring. And one of my favorite quotes about mentoring comes from former Surgeon General here, Dr. Joycelyn Elders, who said, "You can't be what you can't see." Very simple but profound quote there, and one that I carried with me. Along with finding mentors, I kind of wanted to build community among my peers. I found a real incredible source of that with the National Society of Black Engineers. This was an organization that was founded in the 70s, and I joined a few years later as an undergrad at Georgia Tech. This organization was a game changer for me. It helped me to connect with others who had the same passion for engineering, but also we could relate to each other's struggles and our stories of feeling and being isolated on our campuses. And we were looking for mentors and wanted to help others do the same along the way. So NSBE allowed me to hone my own leadership skills. I actually served as national chairperson of that organization from 1987 to 1989. And I helped the organization buy its first headquarters building in Alexandria, Virginia. And now as a lifetime member, I get to connect with NSBE even today. And I actually even met my wife through NSBE, so I owe it even more than that. So great experience for me. Through my involvement with NSBE, I entered graduate school feeling pretty confident about myself. This is a flashback to my hooding and my graduation with my PhD at Berkeley, where I got my PhD, as was mentioned, in electrical engineering and computer science there. And this was 1991. And I think of this time as an important part of my development, not just academically, but also a period where I was able to grow my leadership skills. I helped form an organization called Black Graduate Engineering and Science Students at Berkeley, BGES for short. It was clear there that African-American students were really abysmally underrepresented in the STEM fields in graduate school. In fact, when I got my PhD at Berkeley in 1991, I was one of only about 30 African Americans that year who got PhDs in engineering in the country, 30 in the country. You could put us all in a classroom, but there were 30 in the entire United States. So just give you some perspective there. Along with supporting my peers in BGES, I also created other programs, even as a student there as well. One of those was called Superb, Summer Undergraduate Program of Engineering Research at Berkeley. The goal there was to bring together a diverse and talented pool of students and motivate them toward graduate school. And I'm really proud that that program continues even to this day, shown by this picture of a group of recent participants in Superb. And Todd mentioned SURE in my introduction. So I wanted to kind of recreate the spirit of Superb when I joined the faculty at Georgia Tech in 1991. So I created SURE, Summer Undergraduate Research and Engineering / Science program. With a cumulative funding of about $3 million over many years from NSF, we every summer hosted underrepresented students at Tech to do research. Ultimately, our goal was to see them pursue graduate education somewhere. We wanted them to come to Georgia Tech, but we wanted them to get a graduate degree somewhere. And about 75% of the students over the time I was running the program did actually go and get a graduate degree. And about half of those got their graduate degrees at Georgia Tech. Very successful program. I was very gratified by that. And this program also still exists. Before I get to this picture, let me just mention, Todd mentioned FACES. I also was co-creator and co-director of a couple other programs. FACES was facilitating academic careers in engineering and science. And then there was this University Center for Exemplary Mentoring, Sloan Foundation funded program. The goal for both of these programs was to increase the number of underrepresented PhDs from Georgia Tech. And we were very successful in that objective as well. Over the course of the FACES program, more than 430 students of color received PhDs in engineering or science at Georgia Tech. And that was the most in such fields in the country by a pretty large margin, which kind of led to this next opportunity here. So my dad used to always say one day I was going to be president, but that didn't happen, but I have been able to meet one or two of them. In 2015, I received the Presidential Award for Excellence in Science, Mathematics, and Engineering Mentoring from President Obama here, as you can see. this was due to the efforts that we had in supporting underrepresented students at Georgia Tech and the success that we had in achieving that goal. And receiving that award really made me reflect on the people who'd helped bring me to this point. I thought about my parents, of course, and Dr. E from Georgia Tech, and my wife, Lachelle, and our daughters, Simone and Jordan. All the people that brought me love and support up to that time was really a highlight of my career. I also, you can see the president right there. He's asking me about where I got my tan suit. And it had some influence on him in tan suits a little later in his career. Just kidding. But it was definitely a career highlight. I keep talking about mentoring. I also thought of the man on the far right here in this picture, who's Wayne Clough, President Emeritus of Georgia Tech, pictured here with our wives, Michelle and Ann. But Wayne and my relationship goes back more than 2 decades. In 2002, he gave me a real pivotal opportunity in my career by selecting me to serve as his executive assistant at Georgia Tech. And that's something like chief of staff. So I was his chief of staff. I learned about the high-level administrative responsibilities in academia and how complex organizations like the ones we run operate. And Wayne really just taught me about effective leadership. I learned that a president or a chancellor of university is a lot like being a mayor or a CEO. You have a lot of people with many diverse interests competing for your time and resources. You have to be diplomatic but decisive in tough situations. And you have to set an example and a tone for others to follow. He also taught me that an effective leader needs to be a good listener. You don't need to be the kind of person who likes to hear themselves talk and own the room. And what matters more is hearing people out and processing that information and encouraging others to collaborate and find solutions. And more than anything, Wayne taught me the value of a good team. Surround yourself with the right people and you're likely to find success. And we're pictured here. Wayne was, after his time at Georgia Tech, he was secretary of the Smithsonian. And during his time as secretary of the Smithsonian, the Museum of African American History and Culture was conceptualized in DC. So we got a chance to go to the grand opening of that museum. And here we are pictured as we are about to attend one of the big fundraisers, one of the big galas during the opening. And we met celebrities like Oprah and Sam Jackson and people like that. So that was a fun time. So moving on. And you can see Wayne actually hooded me at my investiture at UC Davis. So I carried all the lessons I learned from him all the way to Davis. I had a great run there at Georgia Tech, serving as dean and chair of the Department of ECE. But I couldn't pass up this opportunity to lead at UC Davis. We're currently ranked the #5 public university in the nation by the Wall Street Journal. We're located about 10 miles from Sacramento and at the center of political power in California, the capital. We provide a pipeline of talent to Silicon Valley and the broader Bay Area as well. And I was attracted to Davis because of its inclusive spirit and diverse community in large part. It was, California's demographics are changing rapidly, and one of my goals is to make sure our student body and our faculty and our staff mirror the state's demographics and population. Let me just shift gears and talk now about why I think diversity is important in STEM for both in academia and in business. And I believe we deeply in that we need to prepare students for a workforce that's increasingly diverse and increasingly global. Businesses, laboratories, universities are going to need to fill the shoes of the current workforce, and there's a competitive need to sustain U.S. global leadership and innovation that's also important. So for me, diversity is not just a buzzword. It's at the root of innovation and technical advancement. The greater diversity we have in research, the more likely we can make discoveries and solve problems. A wide mix of backgrounds, experiences, and ideas are necessary to make that happen efficiently and robustly. And I'll give a couple of examples of why I say that. The first airbags in the automobile industry actually almost killed women passengers when they deployed. Why? Because they were tested on male anatomy crash test dummies, which were larger in stature. And then when they deployed in real life and hit in cars, they hit women in the face, snapped their necks back, And as I said, almost killed them. There were no women on those design teams, obviously, right? We also find even today, some AI programs for facial recognition have inherent race and gender bias. One African-American researcher tested various facial recognition programs, systems while wearing a mask, a white mask to hide her features. She found that these systems work better on men's faces compared to women's faces. She also found that they work better on lighter toned complexion faces. In fact, she recorded error rates up to 47% on darker skinned women like herself. And this is the researcher pictured here. Her name is Joy Boalamwini, and Joy was one of our undergraduates at Georgia Tech back in the day. She since went on to get a Rhodes Scholarship and is doing great things. I think she just wrote a book, and I'm really, really proud of Joy. She'd also be a good speaker, maybe, if you wanted to have someone else in this series. One more example I'll just mention. This one's also a little scary. Similar to the facial recognition problem I just mentioned. Another study found that people of color are more likely to be hit by driverless cars. Like the face recognition, the driverless cars are better able to detect pedestrians with lighter skin than those of us with darker skin, pigments like myself. So, you know, these are all real practical examples of why diversity, as I said, is not a buzzword. It actually gives better outcomes. If you have diverse design teams involved in some of these examples, I contend and assert that you have better outcomes with the products that are produced. I think we make a clear point here about that. So I encourage you all to think more broadly about diversity, equity, inclusion. Think about how society benefits when there are many diverse perspectives. We're working together to find solutions to our problems. And most importantly, think about leading by example. And that might mean listening to diverse perspectives or working to recruit a diverse workforce or team. It also might mean using your own gifts to mentor a rising talent. I think together we can empower the next and more diverse generation in STEM. So I'm gonna stop there. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to take questions through whatever format. If you want to do the hand raising function or through the chat, either way is fine with me. So please feel free to ask some questions.
Great, thank you so much, Gary. I think if the hand raising function can work, let's try that. And you guys can unmute yourselves. If you want to put something in the chat room, then we can read out the question. Gary, let me maybe start. What things, now that you've learned a bit more about our organization and some of our thoughts, what things would you suggest that our group be thinking about and to operationalize some of the things that we might do?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I'll just mention some of the things that I mentioned to you last week. I think first is when you're searching for talent, recruiting talent, you may have to think beyond your traditional comfort zone, or where you like to look for. People like to look for people like them. So where did I graduate? I'm going to look for people in the same place where I graduated. But you know, one of my other favorite quotes is by this guy Willie Sutton, who was a bank robber, and they asked Willie, "Why do you rob banks?" And he said, "Because that's where they keep the money." So the idea is to go where the talent is, not necessarily where you're comfortable searching. So if, for example, if students of color are being produced at HBCUs or Hispanic serving institutions, maybe that's where you should look for them. Another example, or another piece of advice I'll mention is think about hiring in clusters rather than onesie-twosies, because people like to have a community, and it helps to be able to, rather than coming in as with the appearance of tokenism, if you have a group of people that are coming in together, it enhances their comfort level with the institution. And finally, I'll just mention one more in hiring, not hiring, but in promoting people. There's a good rule of thumb that's called the Rooney Rule, which named after former Steeler Pittsburgh Steelers owner, Art Rooney, who said, let's when we interview people, let's make sure we always, in every leadership set of interviews, make sure we always have a diverse pool, right? So that means when you have a group of people interviewing for a leadership position, make sure that the pool is diverse. That doesn't mean that the diversity candidate necessarily always gets hired. It just means that they get some exposure and they get some opportunity to present themselves to your leadership, and maybe they might get the next available opportunity. So those are a few examples that I use, strategies.
Great, thanks, Gary. Yeah, in one of my town halls I had with some of the from our trainees, the Rooney Rule did come up, and we had a discussion around that. I think that's an important feature. All right, we've got a question here from Eric Beatty. Can you suggest organizations, websites, or resources from within UC that can help us to not miss talented scientists of color when we're looking to add to our team?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there, at the Office of the President, there's a diversity, equity, inclusion. One of the vice presidents, Yvette Galat, runs the UC system-wide diversity, equity, inclusion efforts. And there's, if you go to just the ucop.edu and search for diversity, you can find that site. And then there's all sorts of programs. There's these postdoc programs. There's enhancing faculty diversity, which is one of the grants that we got at UC Davis for the last couple of years. Various summer programs for younger students. There's lots of resources there for the UC. And I think it's probably fair to say that each of us individually, I know UC Davis for sure, has a diversity, equity, and inclusion website that summarizes all the activity that's going on our campus. I'm pretty sure Berkeley and UCLA and San Diego and all the others have something similar.
And along those lines of the UC system, I have a question from Victoria Yoon about what you thought about the UC making standardized tests as an option at the undergraduate level, and how that would lead to selecting qualified candidates who are well-deserved in academia.
Yeah, you know, that's a really good question. So the standardized tests like the SAT and ACT have long been shown to have bias. However, I think the way that we were using them, the SAT was one in criteria in a set of 14 that was used for admissions purposes. So we were kind of using them as one tool in the toolbox for holistic admission. And we actually, I think we're doing pretty well in the way that they were being used. But, you know, I do understand the frustration over many years with those tests and the fact that they do have bias. And I'm comfortable with the decision to move on from using them. I will say, I did want to make the point when we stopped, and I did this on my own campus, that look, we should not give the message to our students of color that they can't be successful on these tests. And that's the wrong message. You know, I personally did very well on my SAT. I'm pretty proud of that. But I don't think we want to, you know, misconstrue or at least provide an improper message to our student body about that. But we're going to move on and try to do the best we can to get a talented and diverse class of students each year that mirrors the demographics of California, which is, as a public institution, that's who we serve, right?
Great, thanks, Gary. Sina, I think you've got your hand raised, and just so you guys know, I can't see everybody's hand raises, so if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and speak up. But Sina, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you, Dr. May, for the great speech he made. And I'm also from an immigrant family, and I also faced some challenges going to school. And for example, my best buddy, when he went to get advice when we were undergrads, one of our professors, he was getting advice for going to pharmacy school. And they told him, well, you know, you're an immigrant and you're getting your bachelor. That's far enough. Why do you want to go to pharmacy school? And my friend, he is Armenian Iranian, and he was very disappointed. And he was talking to me, and I told him, well, forget about the advice that professor gave you. You go for medical school. And he did end up going for medical school, get his medical degree. And right now he's successful and he's doing well. But on the other hand, we also have very great professors at UC like for example, Professor Glenn Hatton, and he was my mentor when I was undergrad, and he helped me a lot. And also Professor Barry Oken at Oregon Health Science University. And so there's also a lot of like real good people at academia that are helping minority students and students of color. And I just want to give them a shout out and thank you. And for a standardized test, I would say as far as for perspective of like immigrants in academia, I would say it biases because you're not native speaker. So you wouldn't do well on like the verbal scores, for example. And maybe that's not so fair. So like when I came on, my SAT score wasn't so good. So I ended up going to UC Riverside. But for undergrad, I studied really hard and I worked on my English skills. And then for graduate school, I was able to go to Berkeley. But if there's not so much emphasis on standardized tests, maybe like student can start their undergrad in Berkeley. And if they start their undergrad in Berkeley, they have better shots at going to grad schools.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing your story. A lot of good stuff in there. First of all, good choice on your graduate school. I think, you know, you talked about your friend experiencing what I was calling those microaggressions when he was told not to go to pharmacy school. I mean, those kind of things are insidious and they're pervasive, and we really have to work hard to get rid of the expression of microaggressions all around our various institutions. And, you know, I would say you sound like a good candidate to be a mentor for some students that are coming behind you. So please consider sharing your story with somebody else that might want to follow in your footsteps.
Will do. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gary. We got a question from Bruce Conklin. Clearly, the Black African-American experience is different from recent African immigrants. And you mentioned how important Dr. E was to you when you're starting faculty, and he was from Nigeria. What are your thoughts about as we recruit, focusing on one group or the other, and is there some, might there be some tension or issues between that selection? You know, that tension has not been my experience. I think the African diaspora is a fairly tightly knit group. And whether you are the descendant of slaves, such as me, or you're a native of one of our African countries that has immigrated, we still have a sense of commonality and a bond. There are certainly, obviously, some differences, but from our perspective, I don't think that tension is a strong factor. And I think that in terms of, you know, your diversifying your institution, just do it any way you can. I don't think there's any leaning either way for an immigrant versus someone who was born in the U.S. I think we need people of color in these roles in STEM fields. We're so badly underrepresented that it would be a mistake to try to emphasize such a small difference as country of origin.
Great, thanks, Gary. And we have a question from Norman Hicks. Are there suggestions and tools you might endorse to help create diverse volunteer committees or boards, groups that are more representative of our community?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think, I mean, there's a lot going on, certainly on public boards now. Even, you know, California's got a law that, you know, you have to have women on public boards. I think there may be some movement toward, you know, further diversity on public boards. But for boards of nonprofits and not-for-profits, I think there's similar motivation to make sure that those organizations have proper representation. What you have to be careful of on internal committees is you don't want to overwork people. Usually there's so few of us that we get asked to do every extracurricular thing, right? So you need to be sensitive to that. And so sometimes you may want to get some external advice so you're not putting so much pressure on the few people of color you may have in your organization.
Thank you. We have several more questions, and I'd encourage many of you are putting questions in the chat, but don't feel like I need to read those. If you're comfortable unmuting and asking yourself, please feel free to do so. Does anybody want to do that before I read the next question? I think, Lisa, I was going to read yours.
Okay. Which Lisa?
Okay, Lisa, Lisa, in spite of decades of effort, there's still very few Blacks. So maybe
yes.
okay, go ahead.
Did you want me to talk?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so, I was a postdoc at UCSF in, biochemistry department in the 80s. And I know that there's been an enormous effort to try to diversify, and yet, my experience is going to faculty lunch meetings is there are very few women, and I don't even know if there is a Black faculty member now that Watson is gone. So what are we doing wrong? It's also very evident at many scientific conferences. Obviously have to do something different.
Yeah. So at UCSF, I think Talmadge is still the dean there, right? So there's at least one. So,
yes. Yeah, I know.
I know once we become deans, you guys don't like to count us as faculty anymore.
Well, no, I meant in the faculty lunch seminars that we have.
No, I
So
understand.
I sit around and look around the room,
Just being facetious. This has been an intractable problem. I mean, it has been persistent for many, many years. And I think part of it is we try to fix the person, right? We try to make the person adapt to our environment rather than thinking about fixing the culture of the institution. I think you have to do both, because there are systematic problems with institutions that aren't addressed when we think we have to somehow fix this person and make him or her good enough to be a part of our organization. I don't think that's the right approach. I think we have to think internally about our climate and what might be welcoming and what might not be welcoming, and attack the problem from both ends.
That's wonderful. How about some specifics, suggestions?
So I can tell you about some things we're doing here. We actually are in the midst of a climate study. We're going to hire a professional organization that does that sort of thing. We have various what we call circles. They're called various things: healing circles, racial healing circles, people that can get together and have real conversations about what's happening in their own experience and how we can make this a better community and a better environment for all at UC Davis. We are doing various things at different levels for students, for undergraduates, for graduate students, to improve our access and recruiting. We have this advancing faculty diversity initiative that I spoke of briefly, where we have now required our faculty candidates to write diversity statements. You have to write a teaching statement and you have to write a research statement when you apply for a job. So we figured, why not write a diversity statement as well as another thing we can consider in the evaluation of candidates. So those are a few examples of things we're doing here.
Great, and Jean had a question that was following up on that I think you addressed, is what that UC Davis may be doing better than UCSF in that respect, and what could we learn, which I think is what you...
Yeah, well, UC Davis has an advantage. UCSF doesn't have undergrads, so we have a larger pool to select from, and our 40% of our undergraduates are first generation students, and many first generation students also tend to be students of color. So I think by broadening your pool, you have access to different kinds of talent. Yeah.
And we talked a bit last week about the unique difficulty and challenges around postdoctoral fellow recruitments, where they're not coming into the institution necessarily they're applying to individual laboratories, and then selecting, the institution is examined, I think, by a candidate, but they first have to come through the laboratories, which poses its own unique challenge. But I think we have some good ideas to promote that. Victoria, you've got a great question that I know Ariel has seconded here. Would you like to unmute and have that conversation?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. I was curious about, through the plethora of experiences that you have in organizing student groups and others, is there some common practice, common phrase, common things that the intentions are good, but we're just not really communicating that across the aisle so that we're attracting the right kind of folks in our community?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I can think of one example that's very well intended. And it's when we set up mentoring programs, and I'm a big proponent of mentoring, as I said in my talk, but we sometimes set these programs up kind of artificially, and we kind of just pair people together. We take a senior person and we pair them with a junior person without thinking about whether either one wants to be in that pair. And we think it's a good idea because mentoring is such a good thing. But I've seen that fail many times over my career. A better approach is actually to just encourage the young people to find a mentor, to encourage the experienced people to be a mentor, let them self-organize, and then give awards or rewards for the best mentoring, mentor-mentee pairs and things like that. So you can't force it. You have to kind of provide an environment that it can flourish without trying to force it. That's one example.
Thanks. Katie Claiborne, got a question?
Hi, thanks Dr. May for talking to us today. I was just wondering, for those of us who aren't in positions where we can do hiring or recruiting, what can we do to help promote diversity?
So some of the things I mentioned, like I think if you would cast a wide net and look for places you would normally not look for candidates, you can often find talent you would not have expected to find, and sort of leave your personal biases aside there. I think also you want to start very early and encourage, if you have, I know you have the Plumas program as an example there, get people indoctrinated. That sounds too evil, but you want to get people used to your environment and early, and keep continuing on an ongoing basis to bring them back. And I think that's also helpful. And I think when you have candidates coming in for these assignments, make sure that they have an outside environment that's comfortable. Like, oftentimes if you're, say, an African American like me, you go to a majority environment and you just don't know where to get a haircut, or you don't know, things that you kind of take for granted. So as long as you're sort of aware of and accommodating to some of those cultural needs and differences, that can also very much improve someone's experience there.
Victoria, that's what Gary just mentioned last, something we talked about a few days ago. Also with him is, as we're recruiting, tailoring recruitment visits and things, and being attentive to the day-to-day things, aspects of living in an area, I think will be really important. So going that extra yard and being thoughtful about that process, I think could make a big difference.
Yeah.
Gary, we've spent a lot of time in the last few weeks revisiting our diversity, equity, and inclusion statement from the institution, and re-examining that and sharing that, drafting something, sharing it with everybody in the institution for feedback and comment. And I was wondering what your thoughts are about that, about the value and importance of such statements by institutions. And obviously, if it's just that, it has limited value. But if it can serve as a guiding post for the institution, it could make a difference. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
No, I think, Deepak, those kind of statements are important. We have what we call the principles of community here at UC Davis, and we have them kind of everywhere. I'm in my office. They're on various elevators in various places around the campus, so people always are reminded of them. But as you say, you can't stop there. If you look at after the George Floyd murder, every one of us was sort of writing statements and doing press releases about diversity, right? Including us here. But a good response that came from some of our students and others was, okay, that's a nice statement. Now let me see a picture of your board of directors, right? So if you're just going to make statements, that's not good enough. You got to have some actions behind the statements.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And that's been my emphasis throughout our institution is that, you know, what I think is so important is that we follow up any such statements with concrete actions.
Yeah.
We had a discussion with some of our postdoctoral group and about having targeted goals, even if they're aspirational. So you've got a metric by which to measure yourself over time.
Right.
And that we've got to be committed to a sustained effort over time. There's no magic bullet here, and so we've got to be committed for the long haul.
Yeah, continuity is so important. Yeah, I wrote a paper about this several years ago when we were about best practices in this broadening participation over several decades, and you find that the thing that's missing. You know, there's no silver bullet. You don't have to, there's no magic that needs to happen. We have pretty good examples of things that work. What we don't have is sustained resourcing of these over time. So resources and will and commitment over time is really what's been missing.
Yeah, so we're drafting right now a very concrete strategy for actions that would then follow up on this and holding ourselves accountable. And a lot of people have said that there are tried and true ways to do this, and there have been successes in other organizations, and there have at many levels. I think that's less true at our discussion at the postdoctoral level, and so we're still searching for that, but we will nevertheless have some concrete actions around that, and then measure ourselves and change course if we're not successful.
Great. You got to measure. That's very important.
That's right. That's right. Great. Well, we've had a wonderful series of questions from the group. I want to thank you all for your engagement and attending today, and thank Gary for his valuable time, which I know you're so busy, Gary. I'm overwhelmed that you spent 2 hours with us all in a week, despite everything else that's going on. And it's just on behalf of our whole organization, I know everybody on the call and beyond, we've recorded this, and those who couldn't be here today will have access to it. And so thank you for taking your time with us, and we all look forward to hosting you in person at Gladstone as soon as we can.
Thank you, Deepak, and I'm looking forward to doing anything in person again.
Good. And when we do that, I can guarantee, for those of you who don't know, Gary's a big Star Trek fan. And so I've told the Roddenberry family about your interest, and Rod and Heidi Roddenberry are very, very, very close to us as an institution, and me personally, and they've said that they'd be delighted to, when we can, even fly up for dinner.
Oh, wow. You said the magic words now. I'm going to be all fanboy. Thanks a lot.
All righty.
Nice talking with you.
Okay.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you so much, Gary. Great to see you.